Thank you so much, and welcome everyone for being a part of this. This is very important, as my colleague Sudha mentioned to you. We've just hit 8 billion. COP27 is happening as we speak. Ratnesh also referred to that. And the larger picture, if you look at it, some nations or a bunch of nations are probably fighting, if I may use the word fighting, or maybe not agreeing to the way we have to move ahead for keeping that 1.5 degrees, the temperature rise that we're talking till 2100, that has to be in control, and we have to find measures for that. Now that is not happening, and that control from policymakers, that steps that need to be taken, is not quite happening. Which is why companies need to join hands. Maybe, when we've hit 8 billion, people can also join hands with companies to be the proverbial green Yodha that we are talking about. So building a greener economy together can be with the people and the companies, and of course, if policymakers also join and they can create the enabling environment, nothing like it. That's the broad picture I wanted to talk about. And this also reminds me, and I'll just take 30 seconds on that, a very famous line of a famous book by Charles Dickens, A Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. The best of times because the hope COP27 gives you, and the worst of times possibly because they're not quite agreeing yet. So depending, it's the two sides of the coin, so to say. So with that, I'd like to welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. And just one house rule. We're trying to make this very interactive, just like you answered some of those questions. So if there is any question that you have while the esteemed panelists are talking or making a point, please feel free, and we'll try to keep the mics around so that you can identify yourself and ask the question. Keep the question short so that they can answer your questions. So we'll try and make it as interactive as possible. That'll be wonderful to have. So let me start with you, Niranjan ji. India is urbanizing at a pace, a very rapid pace, and we have some numbers on the screen as well. Realty sector impacts such a huge part of the economy, almost 200 or 250 sectors or so, micro sectors included. What is changing so that the downstream industries could change?
I think, first of all, leadership. The Prime Minister's directive and a commitment to the Paris Conclave is very important. So we have a top-down approach which is coming from the government in terms of commitments of what we need to do at the national level. And I think that's a signal which is there. Very simple things that you see is that you have electric cars coming in, and that itself indicates the downstream commitment that we are going to do. The very fact that you have metros in Mumbai, and just now with the traffic being what it is, it's taken ages for me to come over here today. And hopefully when the metro is done, we have it more easier. So that's the top-down percolation effect that is really taking up. The second effect is actually what you mentioned just now, where the corporates, companies, and everyone has to really participate. And I think with ESG as a commitment into our balance sheets, is one side of it, but a lot of us are doing, even in the real estate field, which is actually contraindication, is doing a lot. So for instance, we have been doing recycling of water for the last 25 years, and we do 8 million liters per day recycling in Mumbai, when the whole city doesn't recycle that much. So that kind of commitment. When we built townships like Powai, I had 20 trees in 250 acres. Now we have 4 lakh fully grown trees, 40 feet tall plus. So development and sustainability is a possibility which is positive to be done. And I think the corporate commitment to that endeavor is extremely important. And the third is education. I think the next generation needs to be taught about what sustainability is all about, whether they are 6 years old or 72 like I am, we all need to be educated in terms of understanding as to what I can contribute to make that difference. I think if we do it at all the levels which we are doing, the top down, bottom up, mid level, every level, Economic Times, thank you very much for actually participating. It's extremely important to see that the media puts in its bit, which is important, and brings that out. So you feel good, like I'm very proud of what I've done. It's nice to say it. So, it makes us feel good that whatever work we are doing is being, appreciated by the people, and ultimately good for me and good for the country.
Okay. Since we are speaking around realty, Arvind, if you can paint that big picture as well, and the steps that you're taking to make the difference, think differently,
Yep.
and making sure some of your partners, and possibly all your partners, can work differently.
Absolutely. So just to build on what Dr. Hiranandani just said, let me put out some numbers. Ratnesh put out one of them. 1/3 of the global greenhouse gas emissions comes from the building and construction sector. Right? About 70% of the building stock that India needs by 2040 is still to be built. Every building we make is going to last for 50 years on this earth, or longer. You put those together and you realize that there is a burning platform there, there is a call to action there. Now, the interesting aspect of this is, if one were to design buildings to be sustainable from the scratch, from the drawing board, the incremental cost is not that much. It's only 5 to 7% additional cost. If one were to try and retrofit a building to become green, to become more sustainable, it is much more prohibitively expensive. So that, I think, is the rallying cry that is bringing a lot of the developers to the table for this conversation. And we have been on this journey now for, ever since 2014, Mahindra Lifespaces has had a 100% green certified portfolio. We've now upped our commitment. We've said by 2030, every building we build will be entirely net zero. So net zero energy, net zero water, net zero waste. That's a tall ask. And if you ask me today, how will we get there? I actually don't know. But we've set ourselves that challenge. And in order to do that, like you said, Ashutosh, it can't be just one actor trying to do it. The entire ecosystem of partners, whether it is consultants, designers, contractors, material suppliers, all need to come on board. And that's the journey we've been on about how do we infuse them with the same energy, the same passion towards this goal.
Prakash, that passion that Arvind is talking about, can you tell it for the airport and how it has shaped up for you? And
Correct.
Also, if you can add a little bit of the challenges that you face in going about this whole process.
Certainly. Let me first start with actually, we talked about top-down, right? It starts actually at the boardroom. It starts from the boardroom, the CEO, and the entire organization, where one needs commitment, not only of capital, but of time and also the people or the resources that would be needed to make it happen. Only then, otherwise it's only on the wall and it'll remain there, it'll look green and nice, but things may not happen. So let me quote our chairman, Mr. Gautam Bhai Adani. What did he say 1.5 years ago at a forum? And he said, businesses that act on the urgent need to limit incremental global warming will secure the largest opportunities over the next several decades. Balancing growth while limiting emissions is an incredible global opportunity for businesses that are prepared to adapt. Now, coming to the airports, because we are one of the verticals there, greener airports is what we need. We need that, whoever comes in over there should feel that this place where I'm traveling through is not generating unnecessary or emitting CO2. So we have, to start with baby steps. But as Mumbai Airport, first of all, a building is a green building, green airport building. So we are net zero there as far as the building is concerned. But we have taken a giant, leap, as I would say, to the future and said, by 2029, we should be net zero. And steps are being taken. But like, as you mentioned, about, EV, about waste treatment, about water, recycling, and everything else. We have, for example, urinals in our airport, which are waterless. So we are saving liters of water over there, millions. But as you asked, what is that is something that may be a challenge as we go forward? I would like to divide it into 3 scopes, scope 1, 2, and 3. Scope 1 is where we ourselves, as the airport operator, what will we do to make it carbon neutral, in the sense no emissions? And we have achieved that. We have been accredited by the Airport Council International, saying that yes, you are 3+ and you are heading towards 4+. In fact, we will get a certification for 4+ very, very soon, like in the end of this month or beginning next month. Going step further, we have complete energy, which is green. We have full energy, whatever we get, power is green power. But the step where the challenge comes in is the aviation fuel. There are stakeholders where we will have control, but not entire control on them. Whether they are our ground handlers, whether the stakeholders which are just on the land side, which means our taxi operators and other, tug operators, whoever they are. That is where we will need to focus to get us to complete, I would say, 0 carbon emission. So hydrogen fuel is something what I think the entire world is working towards, especially the aviation industry. While they have promised that by 2050 they will find a solution, I think that needs to be advanced. As the airports, we will be the first one, probably, Mumbai airport, to be net zero in 2029. So that's the plan, but the challenge is the stakeholders which are around us, and specifically aviation fuel.
Okay, just to remind everyone, in case you have questions, just raise your hand and I'll try and come to you for the question so that we try and make it as interactive as possible. Sumit, data centers, power guzzlers generally as they're perceived, but what are you doing to make it more power efficient, and what are some of those challenges you face?
Thanks, Ashutosh. If you allow me, let me start by sharing a quote from a renowned author whom I admire, actually, Mr. Robert Swan. And he mentioned that the biggest threat that this planet faces is the notion that someone else is going to save it. So it has to be us. It has to be us sitting here. It has to be, all of you sitting in the audience. It has to be the governments. It has to be us as individuals. It has to be us as corporates. It has to be us, right? So on that note, data centers, they are perceived power guzzlers. In actuality, if you see, this is all about data. And we all consume and generate and disseminate data in various shapes and forms almost on a daily basis. All of this data has to be stored, managed, processed, and disseminated from somewhere, and that happens to be cloud deployments. Cloud deployments are well supported by data centers. So it is an inevitable evolution of data. And it is significantly more efficient than having disparate server rooms in your back offices, right? So all of those 250 server rooms are almost consuming 3 times the energy which a centralized data center would do for you in a purpose-built, highly efficient data center. But that's what it is doing at the core level. In itself, a 4 lakh square feet building of a data center, 20 megawatts of IT load capacity, it is going to consume, and I was sharing it offline, power worth thousands of villages. So it is perceived to be power guzzlers, right? Can we make it more efficient? Absolutely we can, and this is our endeavor, right? So almost everything that we do, both at the India level and group level, has sustainability at the heart of it. Let me share how. First of all the buildings that we have, they are certified green buildings. So we do our bit on the base infrastructure, starting with the building itself. Then comes the power. Since we talked about power guzzling, we talk about 20 megawatts, which is perhaps raw power is 30 megawatts coming to power the IT load of 20 megawatts. All of that potentially can be green. So we try and, get more and more renewable energy every year As we speak, we have 40% of all of our energy needs being met from renewable sources, and we are bringing more and more, whatever the norms allow, and we'll talk about those challenges maybe later, right? The third thing that we do is, as a corporate direction, we've moved away from using water in our data centers. So we used only, and we've standardized on air-cooled chillers, so we don't have to guzzle millions of liters of water every day. And that compromises the efficiency a little bit, but then we push the limits of physics to design it in such a way that that is compensated. So overall efficiencies of 1.4 to 1.5 of power efficiency were unheard of in India just about 10 years back. We ourselves had data centers which were running at 2.1, 2.2. Today, even in hot climates and cities like, let's say, Delhi or Chennai or Noida or even Mumbai, where temperatures can go all the way even beyond 40 degrees in the summer months, we're still designing our facilities at 1.4 to 1.5 efficiencies. And then whatever water we use in our legacy facilities, we have figured out a way to reuse all of that water by using reverse osmosis and just pumping it back into the system. So we save 18 million liters of water just by simply reusing the water from the chillers.
Got it.
Right? And then when it comes to, this is all at the design phase. When it comes to the operations phase, it becomes a mutual responsibility between us and the customers, we as service providers and you as customers, which is where we interact very closely with you to understand what is your server footprint, what is the kind of specific airflow requirements it has, how you can make it more efficient. Can you allow me to run it at more efficient ASHRAE standards, 27 degrees, instead of mandating it to be run at 22 degrees and 23 degrees? At this point in time, let me share with you that each degree of temperature that I increase in the data center for the data hall saves 3 to 4% of all of power needs, which I will return back to you as total cost of ownership. So it's a win-win situation. I'll take a pause here in the interest of time.
So some of those people here and outside, you'd want them to charge their phones and devices a little lesser. Will that help?
Charge it more efficiently.
Okay, get the point. Sanjay, so clearly, when we hear from the leaders across industry, efficient use of power is one of the important aspects for them. How is tech enabling it in today's economy?
So I think let's go back to a little bit on history. So Schneider has kind of been at the core of sustainability since a long period of time. So it was in 2005, I think, we started our journey on sustainability, and we published our first industry-leading scoreboard on how an organization like us impacts people, how it impacts the planet, and how it impacts profits. So now all of a sudden you see a lot of 15 years also has gone by, and you see a lot of interest now in boards across the world pushing organizations to be more sustainable on these same parameters. So I think we have traversed that journey pretty well. And if you see, there is a complete transition in the energy landscape as well. So clearly two things work to our advantage. One is electrification and another is digitization. I think these are the two mega trends that we see in this world. And that's, I think, areas where we can really contribute towards transformation, I think. And we have all the eminent panelists here who belong to certain vertical, and our knowledge of the electrical powertrain, digitization of the electrical powertrain, and optimizing it for, and making bespoke solutions for each of those verticals, I think that's where we unlock value. So.
Okay. So let's try and understand how other industries can learn as well. And if I can come to you first. Across the country, while you are present in the larger metro, and there are other locations where real estate companies, how can they start thinking differently so that in the spirit of the conversation, building a greener economy together, they can do a better job with sustainability, better energy practices, more efficient use of their own energy as well?
I think there are a couple of aspects of it which we really need to take. Mr. Subramanian mentioned about one of them, which is working towards green building sustainability. Now, the green building sustainability, a building like that, will cost you about 5 to 7% more than what an ordinary building is. But the best part is that you recover that cost in 5 years. And once you have recovered it, that benefit of energy saving is sustainable lifelong. And as he mentioned, 50 years. So in 5 years, you have recovered the additional cost, and actually you have become more efficient because you have spent on energy saving. So in reality, you have to say to industry that it is cost effective, profitable, and good for industry to become efficient and sustainable. So what Mr. Subramanian just meant is very, very important to all industries. Because if you recycle water, as we talked about it at the airport or the other places, or how we use recycling water, it's not only about the availability of water. For instance, if Mumbai city, which is now going to treat their water outlets, recycles the water, the requirement of the entire city will come down by 30%. And especially industry doesn't need to use the pure water coming from Vaitarna and all these other places. So that's an aspect of it we have to say. It is profitable for the city, it is profitable for the company, and it is profitable for the purpose to do it. Because sometimes, we get confused. People say, oh, it's going to be costly to become sustainable or costly to become green. In fact, it is reverse is true. So it's not about life-saving and improving the environment alone that is there. It is actually a benefit to the economy, it will benefit to the company, and the companies will make more profits, and sustainable environment and good health and everything is going to be there. So you'll need less hospitals, less other negatives to you do if you green the cities and other things that we need to do. So the selling point which we really need to say is that it is profitable to become green. So while people talk about how much is it going to cost our country, I don't think it's going to cost our country anything. The question is, anyway, you have to build houses, you have to build roads, you have to build highways. America and those countries have done it 20, 30 years ago. We are doing it today. Can we not give houses to people who are living in Dharavi? Don't we build it? We have to build it. But if you make green buildings in that whole sustainability that we do, we are actually going to lower the cost and make a benefit. So it's a win-win situation to be sustainable. It's profitable to be sustainable. And of course, it's healthier to be sustainable. That is not getting sold. We are only talking about who is going to pay for it to become sustainable, which is ridiculous. I don't think it is true. Somehow or the other, we don't understand. It's cost effective to be sustainable, it's cost effective to be green, and it's cost effective to become profitable to the whole thing. That's what I feel is to be sold. And that is where Eco Times, Schneider, myself, Mr. Adani, of course, is doing a fantastic job. All of us together should actually tell people it's bloody profitable. So you will make profit if you do it sustainable. On the highways, they are now putting up trees across all the highways. We are building 35 to 40 kilometers per day. Now they are going to plant trees across the entire highway. What is the kind of greening that you are going to do? It's going to make a world of a difference that we really need to do. So that's the real thing which I feel is most important. But you got to teach every child that once a year you plant one tree. And as you grow the population, and we have the largest population in the world, if the largest population in the world decides that every person in India will plant only one tree every year, can you imagine the number of trees that we are going to have in the country? So it has to happen at the government level, which the Prime Minister is doing, the corporate level, which all our illustrious people on the panel are doing, or it should be at the lowest level where people say, separate, don't use plastic, and all the other aspects. So it's not one thing. We talk about money and cost and all that. People have to forget that notion. And the more we put that is going to cost so much to become green. I think that's the most ridiculous statement I read. You have to say it's efficient, it is cost effective, it saves money in the long run. If every builder knows in the country that you have to spend 5% more to make a green building and becomes profitable at the end of 5 years to make it, why will a builder not make it green?
Absolutely. Point taken. Point taken. Mumbai, I'm waiting for some questions in case you have it. I would love to hear it. Just raise your hand whenever you're ready to ask questions. And I'd love to get you to be a part of that conversation while I move on and ask you.
There's one question.
Okay. Okay, can we have the mic here, please? If you can identify yourself, ask the question.
Yeah, my name is Vaibhav Gupta, and my question is related to this awareness at household. So we are talking about industry, we are talking about nationwide, how we do it. But the idea of saving electricity, I mean switching idle air conditioners at home or using a staircase. So all these are very common things, but still the awareness coming to our kids from the schools, but there is no such industry messages, no such campaigns which
so
are
your
happening.
question, sir, please.
So the question is how we make it happen through our industry partnership or a nationwide say ad campaign. This awareness come at every home, not at industry level.
Okay, point taken. Anyone would like to answer? Okay, sure, Sumit.
So, Mr. Gupta, it is actually happening. If you happen to read your own utility bill, the bill actually has a message, and maybe it is fine print, maybe they can do a better job of printing it more boldly, but they do message out about all of these things. And also, I have personally seen ads from BEE talking about the star ratings and making the users aware of the star ratings. I have also seen things about the ideal temperature for running air conditioners.
Correct.
You do a Google search and you will get maybe one of the first 10 searches, you will actually get that document, which actually calls out that if you run your AC at 1 degree higher, instead of 22, let's say 23, and instead of 23 at 24, each such unit saved will be 6% saving in electricity. So the messaging is there. It is for us to internalize. Maybe, we have to inculcate it ourselves. Let's start with this forum, all of us sitting here, 100 people. We go back, talk to our families. So that's 400 people. Those 400 people talk in their schools, colleges. It has to start like that.
Absolutely.
I don't think government can do it.
Absolutely. Sure.
May I add to what Sumit has just mentioned? Most of us would have air conditioners at home, all of us rather. The refrigerants that we use, there is a component of
Correct.
CO2 which is very high. But then there are refrigerants which are available which emit less. They will, but they will emit less. So that is what one should look at, A. The number two is also in our buildings, wherever we live, our offices, there'll be fire extinguishers. Change that. The fire extinguishers have the CO2 and non-CO2 based. Go for the non-CO2 based. We have done that at our airports. So this is how the baby steps that we need to take.
Small steps, but big results possibly. Okay.
I think I just wanted to add something. We
Sure.
must also appreciate the very good work that is being done by our education system, our schools and colleges today around this subject. If you really see, you don't see your children anymore keeping their taps open while brushing their teeth, right? Because they have been taught from a very early age about green, about climate change, about global warming and things like that. So I think it all starts with education, and we must appreciate the education system in the country which is promoting green as well.
Okay, let's move on to the next question while I
Sir,
wait for...
Sir, my
question.
sir. My name is Vijay Damal. I am working for one of the rent-a-car company which is known as Oryx India. Now recently government has introduced the EV policy, electric vehicle policy. So wherein I find it difficult that we have not enough charging stations. So moreover, government policy is to implement the all government vehicles, electric vehicles by 2030, and by 2025 private vehicles also should start electric vehicles. So what is your view on that?
So it's a chicken and egg situation wherein where we have charging stations, there are no cars which are getting charged, while where the cars that come in don't have charging places. But this is happening. All our new buildings will have charging stations forever. But what happens to those buildings which have already got petrol cars, but now they want to do it? So it's a chicken and egg. The moment you get more vehicles, there'll be more charging stations which are going to come up. Soon there'll be public charging stations. Unfortunately, the time frame required for a charging of a vehicle is pretty long. And those batteries will have to change over a period of time. But Government of India is now thinking of having swap batteries where you actually go and give a battery which is discharged, and you have a second battery which you put in the car, and you do it within, just exchange within 1 minute. And you just put the next battery into it. But at the moment, the talk which is there, the charging of cars really takes too long a time to do it. But technology will change, and I'm sure that new answers will come. But yes, we have a lot of charging stations which we have put, and they have no cars to charge them.
Okay.
So we are doing both, actually, but it will take some time.
So if you can just wait, we'll come to you. We'll come to you with more questions. Arvind, a new JV with a fund, a large fund, where you're looking to build industrial and logistics parks. Can you give us a sense of how has been the new approach to energy efficiency for you as you go about with the new project?
Yes. So actually, that's an interesting question, because we have two businesses. We have our B2C residential business, and we have a B2B industrial business. We've run large industrial parks, special economic zones, domestic tariff areas for 20 years now. And we've seen this shift happen towards green much faster on the industrial side. About 5 or 10 years back, most clients would say, look, other things being equal, I would prefer to be in a green facility. Today, that is becoming a gating criteria. If you're not green, I cannot consider you as a potential location to establish my factory or office location, etc. So it's been a very rapid shift. I do expect the same to happen on the B2C side. It may take a little longer. There are several other constraints from a supply side on that, on the B2C residential business. But to speak specifically on the industrial and logistics joint venture that we've set up, that is intended to now again further push the needle and the frontiers of what would an energy efficient grade A facility look like on the industrial and warehousing side. So it's going to be best in class, embedded with technology, as well as sustainable buildings.
Okay, okay. Prakash, the newer airports that are coming from the group, the Adani, now several airports, so going beyond the 6th number, what are some of those best practices which will perhaps make them the best in class? What are some of those energy efficient measures? Today we are trying to understand energy efficiency and its various parameters. So if you can help explain that.
Start with baby steps for the airports that are already existing, but the newer ones have to straight away look at how green can we do it. Now, for example, one of them, we have runways, we have got to keep a lot of space open as per the DGCA regulation. There is a lot of area which is open. Of course, you can't grow trees there, but you can have a lot of greenery. So there's positive. That's how, we will continue to grow in the sense within the buildings, the terminal buildings that we have. How do we bring in far more greenery? I mean, you come to Mumbai airport, you all must have traveled through that. You will see so much of greenery there. In and around the airport, you will see that. So I'm saying start with the baby steps. These are some of the things. The major one which comes in is the green power. Because power consumption at the airport is very high. Have the green power. Have the EV stations. Vijay mentioned over here, he did say that I don't have charging stations or whatever, but we will provide. At the airport, start with that. Go ahead. Have most of your vehicles which operate on the air side, which are EV. Of course, we struggle a bit because we need certain power, certain communication, radio signals and others, which have to be incorporated in these cars or the vehicles. So start working with the EV manufacturers much ahead of time so that we can bring in those EV vehicles across. Now, the ground handling is another part, which, of course, the airlines run it, and there are ground handlers also that we have. Ensure that day one, that we have them as, with the green power or green usage of green power, not any other power that they should use over there. Make it a compulsion. So that is difficult for an existing airport, because there is already these equipment there, and maybe they have bought it recently, so they don't have a resale value because there's specific use only for the airports and so on and so forth. So that is where it is. But start from the top, from the board of directors, down there, have a complete system, monitoring system to ensure that it is implemented.
So is it easier for you, if I were to ask a follow-up question, is it easier for you because of the scale of operations here? Vis-a-vis, let's say if I were to name a Raipur airport or a Bhubaneswar airport, relatively smaller ones, will it be more difficult for them?
No, it won't be. Okay. Because it's simple that you need to buy something, right? Buy a EV vehicle, don't buy a petrol or a diesel vehicle.
I'm talking the bigger picture.
Yeah, even when you construct, when you develop an airport, it's the same thing. You got to bring in a lot of, baby steps, as I said, about, the water conservation, the waste treatment, the green power, all this can be done.
I think one other element we've not touched upon in the conversation so far is green building materials themselves. Right? We've talked about it, electricity, power consumption, both during the construction phase as well as usage phase. But there's a lot of work happening around materials itself, much more sustainable materials, lower embodied carbon. And that's a whole ripe area for exploration.
Okay. Sumit, in terms of the challenges that you face in sustainability and energy efficiency for your industry, can you share some of the details?
Sure. So the challenges are actually all across. We have technical challenges, commercial, regulatory, even people-related challenges. Let me elaborate with small and brief examples about all those four aspects, right? On the regulatory front, the government and the authorities, they need to pick their battles right as well. I mean, let me share two contrasting things. Data centers are always on infrastructure. We are talking about 5 nines of uptime, which is like less than 4 minutes of downtime allowed in a year. But frankly, even that is not allowed. That is just on paper. So it is supposed to be 100%, which is the new normal. So if I have to deliver that, what we do as providers is we will tap 2 different sources of power from 2 different substations, potentially even 2 different generation plants, if possible, and if the geography allows that. But what we bring is put in multiple tens and hundreds of crores, bring this redundancy in. Then we have redundancy at the low side, at the data hall side. We have UPS systems. We have, as a backup of backups, if everything else fails, we have generators for backup. Currently, those generators, let's say, run on diesel. And those generators only kick in if both these sources and all other redundancies that we've already invested in fail, because the utility provider, which is in most cases the state electricity boards, they fail to give us power from both these sources. In that eventuality, I am forced to run DG because I can't let your infrastructure go down. I can't let your email go without sending when you press the send button. It has to go, right? So in that eventuality, maybe in 8,700 hours in a year, I run it for 25 to 30 hours in a year, only when those 2 sources are not available. And then government comes and says, diesel is bad, DG is bad, because there are certain other industries who work 100% on DG, so hence you should also not use it. So the use case and the knowledge is misdirected to an extent. We are there as industry experts, we can contribute, we can tell the government and we can tell the officials about the use case and the relevance. Instead of focusing on this area, if government were to allow us to do 100% renewable energy at site, by lifting all of those issues about contracting limitations, capping which they have for contracting. If I have 100 megawatt contracted for utility, I can only contract, at least on paper, only 100 or 125 megawatts of power from renewable energy, which we all know is lesser efficient because the generation plant will only generate 25% of that power, basis the sunlight, basis the time of the year, basis the season. So there is a limitation to the number of units that we can bring to the grid despite all the efforts. So if you lift those caps, if you allow restrictions like time of the day use and banking norms to be relaxed, and allow me to do 100%. That is the energy well directed, and that is where the regulations need to work towards, not towards disabling the business. So that's an example of regulation.
Good to ask people here. Everyone here uses a smartphone. We'll just come to the question, sir. Everyone uses a smartphone. Can you allow anyone happy with the data not working, data service not working for 2 hours in a day? Or maybe 3 hours? If I make 4, will you agree? Nobody's ready. So you have a problem at hand.
Absolutely.
So Sanjay, what are global best practices? Such a problem, can you address with some of the best practices that you see around the world? Can that be addressed for the industry as a solutions provider? Can you suggest that?
Sure. I think eventually, I think India will lead the pack. Okay. I think we had certain doubts in the audience about.
So this is sounding like the Indian cricket team. Ultimately, we are going to win the World Cup.
Yes, absolutely. We need to be optimistic about the future, right? So I think some of the things that the government is doing right now on EV charging, etc., are really big and they are really transformational. Like we spoke about the battery swapping. If you speak to people outside the country, they are unheard of, right? These are things which are very, very unique to India. So I think eventually India will, and like you said, asked me about the best practices out of India, how can we bring them to India? Right now we might do so, but eventually we'll be exporting these ideas, I'm pretty sure of. Okay, so I think we have two basic issues. One is on the supply side and one is on the demand side. On the demand side, we talked about the buildings. 40% of the energy consumption and the greenhouse effect is caused by buildings. How can we use less and less there? So I think some of the best practices that we can bring about here is, rather than managing buildings on a standalone basis, how can we build buildings that are managed through a unified command and control center? A unified command and control center using EcoStruxure buildings. How can we leverage data which is generated, millions of data, right? And that leads to a data chaos. So we have these ability to churn the data using artificial intelligence and machine learning to be able to come up with a predictive analysis which says that, hey, go do this first, do this second, do this third, rather than a building operator being confused with so much amount of data. So that is one aspect of the thing that we can, I think, best practice we can think about. Second is, we briefly speak about the supply side. Now, we have heard of producer of electricity, we have heard of consumer of electricity, as two different buckets. But actually what's going to happen in the future is it's going to be a mix of both, which is called as a prosumer effect. The producers of electricity will consume them, they will also sell them, right, to the market. For example, a building could generate electricity by solar or wind or any other means. They will use it when they want it, they will sell it back to the grid when they don't want it. So this is going to make and combine that with the EV charging and the combination of AC and DC, what will happen is that the grids will get very, very complicated. So something like an EcoStruxure grid, which will combine and give the building operator the flexibility to use the best power at the best point in time, and be able to optimize it, sell it when it's expensive outside, consume it when it's, things like that. How do you optimize the grid? How do you make it more efficient? I think these are some of the things that we can effectively use in the country as we go.
Okay, Arvind, want to understand from you, facilities management company, but typically in commercial buildings, the challenge that is often faced is the availability of data. How can that be addressed at scale? Because ultimately that could lead to more efficient energy usage as well, and the management of it as well.
Yes. No, I think sustainability and technology are joined at the hip. Without rapid adoption of technology, it's going to be very hard to meet our aspirations on the sustainability side. You pointed to one aspect of it, which is how do you collect data from a building? A building is like a living organism. So using IoT, using sensors in different parts of the building management system in the building, one can pick up the data. But that alone is not enough. That data then needs to be processed. You need to then respond to that data. So managing a building, which seems like a very inanimate object, is starting to become a very high-tech activity. Today's building management systems, today's energy systems that are put into modern buildings are very, very sophisticated. And it requires a different skill set. It requires, a whole new set of capabilities to manage that. And that's where the industry is moving to.
Okay. Mr. Hiranandani, would you like to add to that? Particularly the commercial building part of it.
Well, I think I went to a banker 3 days ago, and they wanted probably there will be requirement of about 1 million square feet in the next 3 years. And they said it has to be green. Period. No discussions of anything less than that, which meant they would want a new building. They would not be happy with any of the old buildings that are available in the marketplace. So it's an attitude which is coming from the demand side completely. If that same efficiency demand is done across the board as we are hearing here today, including the airports and people like that, we will be able to achieve our objective. And somebody talked about, I don't remember who, talked about a leapfrog in technology. Mm-hmm. And I think India will be able to do it. I remember when the mobile phones came, in the first instant, we were ahead of America in terms of the adoption of new technology that took place on mobile phones. And we jumped the gun in terms of it. I think with the attitude which is very proactive from top to bottom, we will also be able to achieve the targets we did there. But there's a rider. The rider says that development does produce negative positions in that. So we have to counter that, and what is happening. For instance, in Europe, they do 1 kilometer in 1 year, development of roads. We do 40 kilometers a day. Now, obviously 40 kilometers a day to sustain our population is going to be higher. So we will be able to do, we will be using and producing carbon dioxide. But the compensation of it, which we are going to do in terms of it, is going to be so much greater. What America has not done all these years, we will be doing in the next 5 years. So our contribution to the world in terms of sustainability and greening of the country and the world is going to be far more greater than probably the whole Western world has ever done for the economies they have created and all at different costs, Like somebody said, manufacturing has shifted from America to China or India, and obviously there's going to be carbon dioxide production here, but actually what is it? You have shifted your manufacturing base to this country, so obviously it's going to do it. So we shouldn't feel shy about the fact that we are emitting the carbon dioxide because there is emission and because development is there, but the sustainability factor which we are doing will be the best in the world. That should be our commitment right from top to the bottom, and which I think the corporates are working towards doing that, and you should compliment them.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. That's wonderful to hear. Prakash, before we try and close, and we'll have some more questions as well, for the airport sector, for what Mr. Hiranandani mentioned, for the airports, give us a sense of the big picture where it'll be completely different, when we're looking at the newer airports and some of the changes that the existing airports will end up.
Planes.
That's some distance away.
I started with that. Yeah. I started with that. It is our stakeholders who will be there, and most of the emission comes actually from the airplanes. So how do we get this energy changed? The source of energy which they use. The ACI, as you would say, is the body, or the international, airports authority also. They are working towards how do we bring it faster, but they have a number or date which to me looks very far. It is 2050. So, it is the manufacturers of these planes also. How do they ensure that they manufacture for the newer or sustainable energy? But is that energy available across the world? Is also what will be important. So I think that's what will take time for it to come in. So the most important is the airplane's emissions.
Okay.
Ashu, just 1 second.
Sure.
Prakash, because you've spent many years with seaports, is there anything you want to add from your experience of what that industry should also be adopting?
That's a good one, because I think over there the shipping industry actually has gone and converted the energy use. First of all, they reduced, what they do is something like, I'll explain in airports also we do indirectly. And that is, they reduce the sailing time. So the consumption of the fuel is reduced, first to start with. Second, they are looking at converting from the present day fossil fuels into how do we get into greener energy. So they are working there. Now come to the Mumbai airport. Why does it apply specifically to the Mumbai airport? We have got a system where actually earlier what would happen is that when everyone is on board, the door closes and the pilot will say push back. Now there will be 5 or 10 of them actually in Mumbai saying push back almost at the same time. But they will all line up in the taxiway to get to the runway. So we are actually wasting a lot of fuel there, energy. So what we have done is, along with the stakeholders, we have come up with a formula and said, not more than 5 should be at the taxiway. Not more than 5.
Okay.
So the others would actually wait at the stand until the first one is gone, then the 6th one will follow in the line. So that they save that fuel and use the power which we have at the airport building. So that's how we have been doing. But shipping industry is slightly further ahead, I would say, of the airplanes and aircraft industry. They have done better. So, of course, they did it because what damages they did to the nature, the sea, was far more actually to start with also.
Okay, I'll just mention a context and then we can come to the questions. We'll just come to the questions just in another minute. So, telecom, mobile telephony started in India in 95 or so, October 95 or so. Since then, India had about 17, 18 million landline phones by 97 and maybe a few thousands mobile included. We were adding about 15 to 18 million mobile phones by 2000 in another 10 years. So that's the context that you were talking about, the pace at which we are growing. Perhaps we could see that in the case of aviation as well. West taking a lot more time, perhaps, to complete or reach that target, and hopefully India wanting to do it faster. Okay, now questions, please. You'll have to identify yourself. Okay, we can start here, if you can give the mic. Identify yourself, and if you can confine yourself to the questions. Okay, sir.
Yeah, Vaibhav again. So my question is related to aviation. So as we said, there should be some measurement. So especially on the ground power unit or all these airlines, whatever they are using. And plus it has another angle, like Europe is much ahead. Their airlines are having their energy targets and much more commitment towards sustainability versus the other players who are having here. So how Mumbai airport is going to really put these measurement targets, which airline is really moving towards more optimization, more conversion towards electric vehicles for these ground service equipments, how this is happening?
Okay, sir.
No, but very, very well put, in the sense on the ground handlers, we are the ones as airports who have actually gone to the policy makers, the Ministry of Civil Aviation, as combined, all airports have actually gone to the Ministry of Civil Aviation and asked to bring in the rules for conversion of the current vehicles that they use or the equipment they use to convert into, e-based or e-power. And that is happening. I think over a period of next 4-5 years, we will see that conversion happening. So it is across the board for every airline, because foreign airlines won't have their own ground handlers here. They'll have to use one of the ground handlers we provide or we permit to operate at the airport. So we can push them and automatically that will happen. From the aviation front, it is, as I talked about, it's the fuel that they will have to do or look at. The other one where the development is taking place and is going to happen sooner than later, I would say, is today the pushback is done by vehicles. Tomorrow we are looking at a possibility that the pilots can do it themselves. There is an equipment which is being looked at. It has not yet been, even the proof of concept has not been completely done, but it is in the making. And we are working with a particular service provider whether that can be introduced. So then you won't see these vehicles actually operating at the airport. Far more safer. You don't have to burn your fuel. You will straight away go to the runway and there you start. So those are some of the measures which can come into play.
Okay. Can we have the question here, please? I'll just come to you, sir.
हेलो, गुड इवनिंग टू ऑल। सर मेरा सवाल यही है कि आपका जो काम है बहुत बड़ा है, बहुत ग्रेट है, लेकिन उसके लिए जो बेसिक चीज़ लगने वाली है या तो एलईडी या तो सोलर पैनल, वो हम सब इंपोर्ट करते हैं। उसके लिए मेड इन इंडिया के लिए आपके पास क्या प्लान है? और जो अभी ईवी रन हो रही है वो उसको चार्जिंग करने के बजाय अगर उसके ऊपर सोलर पैनल लगा दिया जाए तो उसका वो कैसे रहेगा?
मुझे नहीं मालूम यहाँ पर कौन ईवी एक्सपर्ट है।
ईवी एक्सपर्ट, अच्छा, बट
नहीं सर, बेसिक सवाल एक ही है कि सोलर पैनल, हाईटेक सोलर पैनल और एलईडीज इंडिया में कब मैन्युफैक्चर होंगे, या जो वाइंड मिल आप बता रहे हैं?
आज तो हो रही है, ऑलरेडी स्टार्टेड है,
मैन्युफैक्चर हो रहा है।
नहीं, बहुत मैंने सुना है कि सब चाइना से आता है, बहुत सारा चाइना से आता है, मैंने सुना है, मुझे ज्यादा नॉलेज नहीं है।
अभी तक सब चाइना से ही आता था, अभी यहाँ शुरुआत हुई है और होप कर रहे हैं कि अभी सब पूरा हिंदुस्तान से ही आएगा। अभी तक जो आप बात कर रहे हैं वो सही है, क्योंकि वहाँ सस्ता मिल रहा था और वो कर रहे हैं, लेकिन अभी हम भी मैन्युफैक्चर कर रहे हैं हिंदुस्तान में। कितना परसेंटेज हमें नहीं पता, लेकिन शुरुआत हो गई।
अडानी ग्रीन का एग्जाम्पल ले लो, अडानी ग्रीन का एग्जाम्पल ले लो, वो मैन्युफैक्चर कर रहे हैं यहाँ पर, सोलर पैनल सब कुछ। तो नो डाउट हमारी डिमांड बहुत ज़्यादा है, बट अभी मैन्युफैक्चरिंग पिकअप हो रहा है।
Okay. So next question, I'll come to you, sir. I'll come to you. Okay, your question, you identify yourself and you stick to your question, please.
Yeah, myself Gangaram Dalvi. Sir, we are talking about sustainable and net zero mission by 2070. So when it comes to end user, I mean when it comes to green products and sustainable products, there are so many value chain players like designers, the contractors, installers, manufacturers, and the operators. So when you conclude, do all these things, the way sir has said, sasta milta hai. So when it comes to procurement, say, sourcing part, how do you address such kind of things? Because this, as he mentioned, there is a down payment for this. Some additional cost needs to pay. So how do you address such kind of issue when it comes to, normal products and something which is urban net zero products? So how do we address such kind of sourcing challenges at this moment?
Let me take that.
Sure.
So I think as Dr. Hiranandani said, we have to get out of this notion that it costs more. Very often when you're sourcing green, one of the first factors you look at is where am I sourcing from, how far from. So in a building industry, what we look at is can we get all our materials within 100 kilometers of the site. That itself makes it green because there's less transportation costs, less diesel burning, etc. And then as I said, you look at green materials, you look at lower wastage, all of that adds up to green. So it is not, it's a myth that it is significantly higher cost. In many cases, it's actually a lower cost.
Okay.
Take in our case, in the airport, we already have the green power. We are paying extra to get that green power.
Today,
but that's the commitment. So you have to put your capital there. It's an investment that has to be made.
So in Mumbai, you can buy green power if you want. Yes. Other cities, I understand, don't have it. Some are working towards it. But you have to pay a little higher price for that.
Correct.
Okay, sir. Your question, please.
Good evening, everyone. We are in a process of building a green economy together. And power storage is the missing link. So how we are meeting this challenge?
From Sanjay, would you like to?
Okay, so we are not in the business of power storage, but as far as we know that, yes, it's a challenge, and it's a challenge because of the battery technology and the availability of batteries as of now. So across the world, there are corporations that are working on better and better storage technologies. Yeah. So I think the idea will be to leverage those technologies as it goes forward. There are supply chain issues, there are manufacturing issues, there are social issues also when it comes to mining of these metals, etc. Yeah. So you need to overcome all these challenges in a graded manner. So I think the world is focused upon this, and there are corporations that are working very hard on trying to get over these supply challenges. So I think we will get to a point where it will become sustainable and economically viable to be using the right storage technology.
Okay, one last question. Sure, sir.
I want to share. I have a phone over here which is costing more than 1 lakh of rupees, an Apple phone. I still have a problem with the size of the battery which is there. So you can imagine there is a battery problem for all storages in the world, and it's not to do. And if Apple with all its technology is not being able to sort out this problem, obviously this battery problem is an issue. And I think the world is working towards it in terms of it, but macro storage, small charging issues are also there in terms of batteries. So it's not only storage, it's also about the charging time that you really need to do in terms of mobility, especially when we are talking about it. That's why ships will never be able to get into that type of EV power, battery power storage, simply because of that. So they're looking at hydrogen, they're looking at other mixed fuels in terms of it for the purposes of doing this part of it. It's a big problem, but it's a technology problem. One day I hope it will get solved.
Can I add to that?
Sure, sure.
So in reality, only 20 to 25% of world's energy is met through electricity. 75% of energy and fuel is still fossil fuel. So we're talking about diesel, petrol, LPG, CNG, jet fuel, whatever you want to call. So if we really are intentional about going green, let us continue the focus on EVs and let us continue the focus on renewable energy, but let's not lose focus that 75% of the problem lies elsewhere. So we have to look at green hydrogen, we have to look at green ammonia, and we have to look at use cases where all of this can be used instead of jet fuel for powering, all those plants, manufacturing plants. And that is where the actual success will lie, and not just in electricity.
Okay. One last question, sir. Yes, please.
Thank you all for such an insightful session. My question is a bit different. So we are talking about building a green economy together, and we as citizens are, also responsible for that, apart from the various acts that the big organizations take. So my question is that, do you think it is the right time for organizations to introduce some kind of, HR policy interventions wherein all the employees are also motivated or, incentivized to contribute towards this? Just as a small example, if I'm an employee of a big organization, I demonstrate that I've saved 10% in my household electricity, and I get a 2,000 rupees Amazon voucher, for example. Because I think every individual act matters.
Okay. So do you work for Amazon?
No, I don't. But I love Amazon.
Okay. Anyone would like to take that?
Yeah, so I think you've been eavesdropping on some of our leadership conversations, because this is exactly what we were talking about just last week in our group executive board meeting about, can we create an app which actually just creates points based on how much carbon you save. It could be electricity saving, water saving, something that's very simple, starting with our employees, potentially our home buyers, our car buyers, everyone, and create a reward point system around that. So I think it's a very powerful idea. If I could, just link to that, I wanted to leave you with one thought, a hope maybe. We've talked a lot about the cost of sustainability, and that was the traditional mindset about how do I look at it on my P&L, and let me put this in the context of financial statements, right? So sustainability used to be looked at as a cost line on the P&L. How do I minimize it? How do I kind of spend it wisely, etc.? Over time, it moved to the balance sheet. We started looking at it as investment. What is my return on investment? How long will it take? I'm seeding something for the future. The real unlock is going to come when we move it back from the balance sheet to the P&L, but to the top line, not to the cost line. What new market opportunities does it open up? What new customer segments can I go after? What new product offerings can I create based on this? That is when this will create a much more positive spiral and get us to where we want to be.
Okay, let me wrap it up then. Okay, sure. So the mic, please.
You had infrastructure for Schneider. We've not heard enough from you. Can you give us one or two use cases on what kind of a difference have you been able to make? significant difference with a couple of your clients that really opens our eyes to possibilities?
Yeah, sure, I can do that. See, I just spoke about, in the earlier session, I spoke about India leading the world. So one of the customers that we work with, Capgemini, okay, they experimented with a concept of moving away of managing campuses by building and managing it through a unified operation center. They were so successful in creating a sustainable building that they are now trying to hook up buildings across the globe into this command and control center, using Schneider solutions, of course, let me add.
Okay, that's incidental. That's incidental. Okay, so perhaps, since Sudha mentioned, any other, while these are very large brands, would you like to mention something about smaller businesses as well, where they could benefit from the power efficiency that could result for their businesses?
Sure. So I think the solutions that we provide are not really only for the mega scale infrastructure and things like that. Even small scale business establishments, etc., today adopt digital and cloud technologies much bigger, in a much faster way than what a larger corporation would do it. For example, a larger corporation would say, I'd like to hire a big four, I'd like to do a complete assessment, and then they come up with a huge proposal which will take years to implement, etc. But I think the smaller companies, they see a quick payback in what we propose in terms of modular solutions which they can invest in as they grow. And they see a quick payback and they're willing to invest it and try it out. So I think that's the kind of approach that we are taking on both sides. It's not just about those large scale infrastructures that need to contribute to the country. We are a country of entrepreneurs, right? Small and big both. So I think that's the value that we unlock here.
Okay, let me wrap it up then with the larger picture. So here's what I take. Prevention is better than cure at the individual level. When you try and save power as an individual, say make it more efficiently, it shows up for you immediately. For small businesses, this is an opportunity to ride and learn from the opportunities that Sanjay just mentioned. For larger businesses, technology and measuring some of your efficiency needs and some of the related topics that was mentioned, that could be the opportunity for you, so that we can all work together for a greener economy together. Thank you all, gentlemen, for being with us. And thank you for being a wonderful audience. Thank you indeed.